Sometimes you find yourself looking through old photos and realizing the exact moment your life changed completely. It was on one October afternoon that I decided to be more than just a lonely guy focused on building my career in construction. Ashley's shy smile at the corner coffee shop made me believe that there was something bigger out there. She carried a sadness in her eyes that I wouldn't understand until later. The recent loss of her husband in combat had left her alone with two little kids. Dylan was only 7 and Sophia was 4. That day, I promised myself that I'd be the dad those kids needed. Now, 10 years later, I understand that some promises take you down paths you'd never imagined, and that even genuine love isn't always enough. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. Our relationship blossomed naturally. Ashley and I shared the same desire to build something meaningful. She worked as a nurse on the night shift, and I adjusted my hours at the construction company to be there when the kids needed me. Dylan was a curious kid, always asking questions about construction and tools. Little Sophia would cling to my legs asking for a hug. In the first few months, I made sure to keep a respectful distance. I knew they were still processing the loss of their father, so I started slowly, just being present. I took Dylan to school, helped Sophia with her homework, and little by little, we created our own routine. The proposal happened during a picnic in the park, a year later. The kids were in on it. Dylan held the ring box while Sophia scattered flower petals. Ashley cried, and for the first time since I met her, I saw her eyes light up without that tint of sadness. We moved to a bigger house in the suburbs. I painted the kids' rooms in the colors they chose, blue for Dylan and lilac for Sophia. I even built a treehouse in the backyard, something I'd always dreamed of doing for my own kids. Every smile and every spontaneous hug made me feel like I was building something truly special. We kept the photos of their biological father in a special album in their room. I made sure they kept his memory alive. After all, I wasn't there to replace anyone, but to add even more love to their lives. Ashley seemed happy with our new dynamic, and I really believed that we had found the perfect balance. The next years were completely devoted to our family. I made it a point to be there for every important moment. Sophia's dance recitals, Dylan's soccer games, school meetings, and birthday parties. I saved every drawing, every Father's Day card, every moment when they called me Dad for the first time. I worked hard to ensure that they had the best opportunities. When Dylan got into music, I bought him his very first guitar. And when Sophia dreamed of being a gymnast, we invested in classes. Ashley always said I was spoiling them. But to me, seeing the light in their eyes when they achieved their dreams was the best reward. I eventually got a promotion at the construction company and began managing bigger projects. The schedule got more flexible, which allowed me to be there even more. Sometimes I'd take Dylan to the construction site and explain how each piece of equipment worked. He was fascinated by the heavy machinery and all the ongoing projects. On weekends, we began our own traditions. Saturday was pancake day. Dylan would pick the flavors, and Sophia would decorate them with fruit. Sunday afternoons were sacred for our family board game sessions. Ashley looked satisfied watching how we had come together as a family. I saved up for years so I could give them memorable vacations. I took everyone to Disney when Dylan turned 12 and Sophia turned 9. Seeing their faces light up in front of Cinderella's castle made me feel that every effort was totally worth it. The following year, we went on a camping trip where I taught Dylan how to fish and Sophia how to identify constellations. As the kids grew older, I encouraged their studies and dreams. I even set up a small studio in the basement for Dylan to practice with his band, and I turned an extra room into a practice space for Sophia. Sure, Ashley sometimes said I was investing too much in them, but I always replied, when it comes to love, there's no such thing as too much. With every anniversary, I silently renewed my vows to be the best dad and husband I could be. I cherished every moment, every achievement, every smile. Back then, I truly believed we had built a solid, unshakable foundation. The change started gradually when Dylan hit his teenage years. Little acts of rebellion soon turned into outright confrontations. Invitations to hang out in the garage fixing cars were met with curt responses. The curious kid who had loved hearing my construction stories was now rolling his eyes every time I tried to talk. Sophia, who'd always been my little princess, started following in her brother's footsteps. Spontaneous hugs were replaced with distance. Family movie nights turned into disputes over curfew times. My opinion, once so valued, was now met with disdain. Family meals became a minefield. Dylan began bringing up his biological father more frequently, especially when I tried to set boundaries. "You're not my real dad," became his favorite phrase. What hurt the most wasn't the words themselves, but the silence from Ashley when it happened. One day, I found my collection of old watches completely smashed on the office floor. Sophia was there with a defiant look, saying they were just old things. I tried to remain calm and explain their sentimental value, but she just shrugged and walked away. Ashley downplayed the incident, saying it was just a phase. Soon, school grades started to drop. When I tried to talk to Dylan about missing classes, he retorted that I had no right to interfere in his life. The secret parties, the lies about where he was, coming home late at night, it all started to become routine. The studio I built in the basement became a hangout for friends I didn't approve of. I uncovered hidden bottles of alcohol and evidence of cigarette use. When I confronted Dylan, he laughed in my face and said I should be grateful that he was still living under my roof. The way he stressed "my" carried the full force of his rejection. But the worst was watching 14-year-old Sophia go down the same path. The sweet girl who once made me elaborate cards now barely spoke to me, unless she was asking for money or permission to go out. All the respect we'd built over the years seemed to melt away like snow under the sun. Meanwhile, Ashley's behavior became more and more disturbing. Instead of forming a united front with me, she started undermining my efforts to set rules. When I wouldn't let Dylan go out on weeknights, she secretly gave him money for an Uber. When I set curfews for Sophia after parties, Ashley would call and say she'd let her stay out later. The fights between us heated up. At first, it was just about our different approaches to parenting, but soon it turned much deeper. Ashley began saying that I would never truly understand what it means to be a dad, because I didn't have biological children. Those words stung like knives, especially after the 10 years I'd given this family. During one particularly tense dinner, Dylan purposely broke the watch I'd inherited from my grandfather. Instead of scolding him, Ashley defended him, claiming I was being materialistic. When I brought up the sentimental value of the watch, she snapped back that I should understand true family feelings better, since theirs was based on blood. School meetings turned into sessions of humiliation. Teachers expressed concern over both kids' behavior, but every time I tried to speak, Ashley would cut me off, making it clear that the final decision was hers because she was the real mom. The pity in the teacher's eyes only made things worse. Sophia started inviting older boys over when I was at work. When I installed security cameras out of concern, Ashley removed them, accusing me of being controlling. Credit card bills skyrocketed with unauthorized purchases, but any attempt to set limits was labeled as stinginess. Family dinners, once a chance to connect, had become sessions of constant provocation. Dylan made it a point to show photos of his biological father during meals, while Sophia remarked how he was a real hero, not just a guy who builds buildings. Ashley watched everything with a satisfied smile, as if silently approving every insult. Holidays became especially painful. On Father's Day, they made sure to visit the cemetery, which I always supported. But when they came back, they acted as if I was invisible. Ashley organized these visits without ever including me, as if I were a stranger in my own family. My work routine became my only refuge. I started spending more and more time at the office, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only place I didn't feel like an intruder. The family photos on my desk, once a source of pride, now seemed to mock my naivety. The final straw came during an argument about Dylan's college. When I suggested using the savings I'd been putting aside for his education, Ashley abruptly interrupted me. "Don't worry about that. His military father's insurance will cover everything. You were always just an extra in their lives, Christopher. A useful extra, but still just an extra." Those words haunted me for days. I realized that it wasn't merely ingratitude or teen rebellion. It was part of a systematic plan to keep me merely as a provider, while slowly shutting me out of the family I'd helped build. It was on a Friday night that everything completely fell apart. I got home early from work, expecting to surprise the family with tickets to a show Dylan had mentioned months earlier. What I found, though, was the garage in shambles, my tools scattered everywhere, paint spilled all over, and the walls tagged with offensive messages. Dylan was there with his friends, blasting loud music, beer bottles scattered around. When I asked everyone to leave, he refused. The argument escalated fast. Sophia joined in, teaming up with her brother in the insults. For the first time in 10 years, I felt completely alone in that house. Then Ashley walked in right into the middle of the chaos. Instead of siding with me, she started yelling, saying I was being too hard on your kids. The way she stressed "your" hit me like a punch in the gut. Dylan even smiled in satisfaction, and that was when Ashley finally dropped the mask she'd worn for a decade. "They're right, you know," she said with a coldness I'd never seen before. "You were never really their dad. You're just the guy I let into our lives when we needed financial stability. Don't get it twisted." The silence that followed was deafening. 10 years of memories flashed before my eyes. Every moment I thought was special. Every smile I took as love. Every hug I believed was real. It had all been an elaborate act. Do you really think you could replace a war hero? You're an interloper who served his purpose. Now that the kids are grown, maybe it's time to admit that this arrangement has gone on too long. Dylan laughed, adding that he'd always thought I was pathetic for trying so hard. And Sophia, my sweet Sophia, who once called me the best dad in the world, was now standing there with them, her look a mix of scorn and satisfaction. At that moment, something inside me broke permanently. It wasn't just the cruel words. It was the realization that the last 10 years of my life had been built on a foundation of lies. Every sacrifice, every moment of dedication, every choice I made for them, it was all part of a silent agreement that only I was unaware of. "You'll never understand what it means to be part of this family," Ashley concluded. "You're an interloper who served his purpose. Now that the kids are grown, maybe it's time to admit that this arrangement has lasted long enough." I went upstairs to our bedroom in silence, ignoring the laughter coming from the garage. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I looked at our wedding photo on the nightstand. The smiles, the promises, the dreams. It had all been an elaborate illusion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment, every sign I'd ignored, every time I overlooked toxic behavior in the name of the love I felt. The painful truth was that I had become complicit in my own humiliation, so desperate to be accepted that I let them trample all over my dignity. The next morning, we didn't speak a word over breakfast. The heavy silence carried a decade of exposed lies. I left for work early, but instead of driving to the office, I drove to the beach where I used to take the kids when they were little. Sitting on the sand and watching the waves, I made the hardest decision of my life. I stopped by the bank and transferred half of our savings to a separate account. It was only fair since I was the one who built our entire fortune. I left the rest for their expenses, including the college I'd dreamed of paying for Dylan. I called my lawyer and started the divorce proceedings. I got back home in the late afternoon. Ashley was on the couch, flipping through a photo album of her first husband with the kids. She made no effort to hide it. I went upstairs quietly and began packing my things. That's when I found, hidden at the back of the closet, the album I'd put together over the years, filled with moments I thought were special. Sophia walked by the door and saw me packing. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of worry in her eyes, quickly masked by the indifference she now wore. Dylan showed up moments later, asking if I had finally gotten the message. I didn't answer. I kept packing in silence, taking only the essentials. I left behind all the gifts they'd given me, the drawings, the Father's Day cards, the photos. They were just symbols of a well-orchestrated lie. The only thing I took with me was my broken grandfather's watch, a reminder that some things, once broken, just can't be fixed. Ashley came into the room as I was finishing. "So, is this how it ends?" she asked, without any emotion. "Are you just going to give up on our family?" The irony in her words didn't escape me. "What family? The one she built on lies?" "I'm not giving up," I replied, closing the last suitcase. "I'm just accepting the truth you all tried to show me over these years. You were never my family. I was just a means to an end." Before leaving, I left the divorce documents and a letter on the table. In it, I explained that despite everything, I didn't regret the love I gave. I would still be cheering for their success, even from afar. I said the door would always be open if they ever wanted to reach out, not as a dad, but as someone who genuinely cared. Dylan and Sophia were in the living room when I came down with my suitcases. They didn't try to stop me or say goodbye. Ashley stayed at the top of the stairs, silently watching. 10 years of shared life ended without a single tear from them. I got in my car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror the house I helped turn into a home, the curtains I picked with Sophia, the garden I planted with Dylan, the porch where Ashley and I used to have Sunday morning coffee. It all now felt like part of a dream I had finally woken up from. I rented a small apartment downtown and threw myself into work. The first few weeks were a trial of self-control, avoiding calls, not driving past the house and not asking about them. The silence in the apartment was deafening, especially on Sunday nights when we used to have our family game sessions. The divorce moved surprisingly fast. Ashley didn't contest anything. Maybe she was afraid I'd change my mind about leaving half of our savings for the kids. At the final hearing, she showed up alone, dressed as if it were just another day at work. We signed the papers without exchanging a word, each signature erasing another year of our shared memories. 3 months later, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside were old photos that Ashley didn't want to keep anymore. One photo caught my eye. Dylan and Sophia in the treehouse I built, smiling and holding up a sign that said, "Best Dad in the World." I tore that photo to pieces, along with the illusion that that moment had ever been real. At work, I took on projects in other cities. The physical distance helped keep the emotional distance. On one of those trips, I met Maria, an architect who, like me, was carrying her own scars. We started by talking about projects and then life in general. She taught me that some people come into your life not to stay forever, but to teach you something. One day, 6 months after I left, Dylan showed up at my office. He looked thinner, with deep bags under his eyes. He said he needed money to settle some debts. I didn't ask what kind of debts, just opened my wallet and handed him what I had. He took the money without even looking me in the eye and left without saying thanks. That was the last time I saw him. At Christmas, Sophia sent me a message, a simple Merry Christmas that was probably sent to everyone on her list. I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, leave nothing but ashes carried away by the wind. Ashley remarried the following year. I heard through mutual friends that her new partner was a successful businessman, someone who could give the family the status they'd always wanted. Photos on social media showed everyone smiling, a picture-perfect happy family. I wondered how long it would be before the mask fell off again. Today, as I sit in my new office watching the sunset over the city, I realize those 10 years weren't completely wasted. I learned about love, about loss, and about the difference between giving and losing yourself. I learned that sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness, and that not every emotional investment pays off. My broken grandfather's watch now sits in a glass case on my shelf, not restored to work again, but as a reminder that some broken things can be turned into art. Just like me, I turned my pain into growth. I hold no more grudges. Anger just eats up too much energy that I now use to build something new. Not a family this time, but an honest life built on truth, not on illusions. Some people are born to be parents and others are meant to teach lessons. I ended up being both, though not in the way I ever imagined. Yesterday I got a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from Sophia and several old photos. She's 21 now, studying psychology. In her letter, she explained that she's been in therapy, trying to understand the toxic patterns our family had developed. She said that only now, after a lot of internal work, has she been able to see just how much I really cared. Dylan is in rehab. The debts he had when he came to me were with drug dealers. Sophia mentioned that he's finally clean after 3 treatment attempts. During one group therapy session, he talked about the father he rejected, not the one who died in the war, but the one he'd pushed away with his own actions. Ashley has divorced again. Her new partner, the so-called successful businessman, turned out to be a compulsive gambler who lost everything, including the house I fought so hard to keep. Sophia mentioned that for the first time, her mother admitted her mistakes regarding me. Too late for regrets, I thought. The last pages of the letter were different. They were copies of pages from Sophia's diary when she was 10. In them, she wrote about how I was her hero, how safe she felt when I checked under her bed for monsters, how she loved our pancake Sundays. The sincerity in those childish words broke my heart. Sophia ended the letter by asking for forgiveness and wondering if we could meet. She said she understood if I didn't want to, but that she'd like to try to build a new relationship, this time based on truth and mutual respect. I stared at the restored watch on my shelf, then at the letter in my hands. Time is such a patient teacher. It shows us that some wounds need to fully heal before you can look at them again. I picked up the phone and started typing a response to Sophia. I wasn't sure if I was ready for a reunion, but maybe I was ready to take the first step toward healing. I set up a coffee meet with Sophia for a Saturday afternoon. I deliberately chose the same cafe where I met Ashley, almost as if I needed to close a chapter. When she walked in, I saw traces of the little girl I once called my daughter, mixed with the maturity time and experience had brought. Our conversation was honest, sometimes even painful. She talked about her fears, her discoveries in therapy, and her journey of self-knowledge. She told me Dylan was making progress in treatment and that, for the first time, he was really facing his demons. According to her, Ashley was also in therapy, finally recognizing her own destructive patterns. I shared with her about my new life, about how I learned to rebuild myself, about how I turned my pain into growth. I didn't mention Maria. Some parts of our past need to remain separate, at least for now. Sophia understood my silence. Before parting ways, she pulled something out of her purse. The last Father's Day card she'd ever made for me, the one she never got to give. "I kept this for 7 years," she said, "waiting for the courage to reach out to you." We didn't hug goodbye, but we exchanged a genuine smile. Some kinds of love never die, they just change form. What we had can't be recreated, but maybe we can build something new, something more real. I went home feeling a peace I hadn't felt in such a long time. Some stories don't have traditionally happy endings, but they can have honest ones. And sometimes, that's enough. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this.